Good afternoon. Hey, there we go. Like, the mic is pretty loud, I think. No? So, thank you for making our session on HDR this afternoon. Please have a seat. We have three presenters today, well, three teams of presenter, and they will give us exciting presentations, not just on HDR per se, but also creating and managing increased color spaces, color volumes, varied color volumes. If you had a chance to attend the session this morning on HDR, that will save you a lot of time understanding the concepts that are going to be presented today. Hopefully you did. If not, I'm sure the presenters will make it all accessible. So we have different viewpoints this afternoon. We have some talking about social media, another use case on live sports, and another one where you have to manage multiple displays with multiple color settings for multiple purposes. And that's what we're going to look at this afternoon. Our first presenter will give us his creative and technical perspective on using HDR from a motion picture and television point of view. Not really. He's actually going to step out of our traditional SMPTE and add a little S at the end for social media. So our first speaker is going to be Ronald Sautier. Ronald is an accomplished drone operator, time-lapser, video creator, trainer, and engineer. As the name implies, he's based in Germany. He's got a robust background in media technology and a very diverse skill set that includes delivering several training sessions and workshops. He's got extensive education and years of experience that gave him a profound understanding of the processes of media production, both on the technical side and on the creative side. He freelances for German TV stations, international workshop providers, and various companies, serving primarily as an engineer, but also as a content creator. His fascination for filmmaking technology has evolved into a deep appreciation for the craftsmanship required to achieve no less than exceptional results. His work integrates technical proficiency in workflow design and camera operation with a passion for visual storytelling in photography, time-lapse, and video. Since 2020, Ronald ventured into social media, amassing rapidly over 1.1 million followers on Instagram, where he continues to captivate and inspire with his striking visual creation. Ronald?
Thank you very much. Hello, welcome. So this is obviously me. Thank you for the introduction. I think more or less everything said is about what I do and what I try to manage on the one side, doing technical stuff for TV stations, like in the transition process to 1080p 50 workflows and such things. And on the other hand, doing the social media stuff for different companies and having a following across all social media platforms, which is quite reasonable. And what I am doing is not to focus on the conventional influencer marketing thing. What I try to do is to concentrate on high quality visuals, to show them and to show the capability of HDR production outside of bigger infrastructure. So what I will talk about today is about why HDR in social media, HDR workflow for Instagram content creation, the technical challenges I'm faced and the solutions I found for my workflow, and to talk a little bit about the future of maybe HDR production on social media. So the big question for me was in the beginning, what if my posts on social media could stop people in their tracks with visuals so vivid they feel like they are stepping into the scene? Or how to stop people from scrolling and stay at my content and watch it. And when you go on Instagram today and look for a picture of this waterfall in Iceland, Skogafoss waterfall in Iceland. I don't know how many pictures are uploaded today, but if you go on Instagram, you will find around 1 to 2,000 pictures uploaded just of this waterfall just today. And why is it still possible to stand out a little bit of that intense mass of content? Why capture yet another shot of this waterfall? Every intro has already been done. The truth is that there is still room for unique creations, and there is room for visual quality. And if you reach a kind of quality, people get afflicted with it, want to see it, and stay with that content. So for me, the answer was to level up my quality to go with HDR. That is not the only option to stand out on that platform. But for me, the visual quality was one which is reachable for me. I'm not someone who wants to perform by himself on that platform. I don't want to say everyone what I do cool and how I am, and don't want to show up what I do. I want to show the pictures. I want to show the nature in my case. And this is done for me with quality, and the quality I use is to go with HDR. So ever since HDR is usable for us as creator, I tried to get into it. So almost 7 years ago, I was one of the first to upload HDR content on YouTube in 8K. I was one of the first doing it on Vimeo. Many platforms used my videos as kind of introduction that there are new possibilities on the platforms. I didn't aggressively push that agenda to bring HDR to the front, but I always been into it and believed that HDR is something which doesn't only work in bigger production environments, but it's also working for this kind of work as a small creator, just showing the world and level up the quality, which is here at least reachable for us. The truth is that we have many devices out there which produce HDR by default. Take an iPhone. Since many years, by default, iPhones record HDR footage, and this HDR footage is uploaded to the platforms. And this is something I think we as media professionals have to deal with too. And if I look on the content which is published from broadcast stations onto the social media platforms, much of the content is still in SDR. And if you're scrolling through the feed and see the bright pictures which people could show you and vivid pictures people could show you from the content creation side, and on the other hand, you have the footage which is broadcasted by more of the traditional channels, then you see a difference in what quality is achievable. And this is something I want to push. And if we go to Instagram and talk from it from a content creator perspective, then what is good for us is that Instagram is based on visual storytelling. With over 2 billion monthly active users, the platform is visual-centric, where images and videos are key. So therefore, if I go with a technology which forces that or enforces that, helps us to challenge or to reach the audience on such a saturated platform like we have there with so much content every day. It's a crowded space. You're not alone, but you can stand out, and visuals can make or break your engagement. So you receive a lot of more interaction if your quality is good than when you do it without. And more engagement means more comments on it, more likes on it, more shares, more interactions, and therefore you could raise the audience and the awareness of the audience for what you can do. Common misconception often on those platforms, especially in the photography world, that HDR is something of combining multiple exposures into one picture and then showing it just on an HDR device. So without utilizing the extra dynamic range, without utilizing the extra of color range you could capture. And that's not the case what I am talking about here. I want to talk about that we are prioritizing the linear presentation of light and color. I know some may say, oh, we don't linear record things, but it's about showing the world as it is. And if there are bright aspects in our picture, if there are highlights, if there are spectacles, I want to see them and transport them. At least when someone is looking at my picture of maybe a sunset, he should be as blinded as he would be as when he steps out of the door and sees that sunset in true life. And this is an advantage we have with HDR and could use it. HDR in social media was suddenly there, to be honest, because I think the major device still today, uploading HDR content are iPhones. And with iOS 16 in 2020, end of 2020, Apple enabled HDR recording by default. And the social media platforms suddenly got HDR content. And there were a lot of problems with that, regarding the tone mapping, regarding the 10-bit color depth they have to deal with because their pipelines weren't ready for that. We saw a lot of poor results in the beginning with the HDR uploads. In early 2023, it got a little bit better. They realized what to do. They learned a lot from how to deal with those HDR uploads. And for me, it was a good option to show on the platform at a very early stage that it's doable without having a studio background more or less on the go. So my office for 150 days a year is a laptop sitting somewhere and trying to export HDR content for my customers, in this case on Instagram, for example. Why HDR? Enhance the quality, stronger audience connections, at least for myself, position a little bit of kind of innovator, because there are not too many out there which have a good workflow doing it, and at least master that workflow for it. When I go to my workflow, in the example for Instagram, I've got several topics from acquisition to final delivery. We produce our content with cameras capable to recording that extended range of light and color, whether that's S-Log or that is another log format from another company or it's RAW. We try to capture as much as we can to bring that into our final product. And from time to time, we use technologies like multiple exposures to create HDR content, but still not displaying with the goal to display it on an SDR device. Instead, we want to show it with the full dynamic range on an HDR device. We use cameras which are called film or video cameras, modern DSLR, mirrorless cameras, smartphones with HDR capabilities. Sometimes they directly record in HDR, but the better for us is if we have the option to do more on the grading side, so have more kind of log format. We think a lot about the scenes we're recording. So we think about landscapes with a range of natural lighting conditions, bright skies, reflective surfaces, deep shadows. We think when we go to interiors with natural light, where we have a dynamic range from outdoor to indoor, to show the possibilities the extended dynamic range has. We think about nighttime cityscapes where we have not blown out city lights. We think about close-up pictures, surfaces, reflections. And all what we try to do with that is to avoid scenes where we just have a minimal contrast, because then we would stand out with that what we or I aim to do, to show that extended HDR option. On the grading side, we just dynamic range and color to achieve our creative intent. We use the software tools like Lightroom and Photoshop for images, or DaVinci Resolve and Adobe Premiere for video, and try to control the exposure, color, and contrast in the way we like it. We think a lot about grading and editing. That's always to the intent what I want to do in terms of, do I want to achieve a natural look? In my case, I often try to show the world like it is. So I have a really natural approach on what I want to do. Maybe it's not totally shown on the screen right now, but that's the intent. This is one of our problems too, so control the quality. And so we have different options to deal with it and to enhance it. And in the end, when we export our content, then we, especially as small creators, run into real trouble because we have a relatively compact and small testing environment. And testing for how the HDR content is looking in other devices is kind of important for us so that we can deliver a good quality and not only a few people with a certain device experience a good visual. So therefore, we have some challenges we're facing every day, and we need some solutions for it. And one of the key challenge we have is monitoring. So monitoring our HDR creations on the go in the field. I know there are many beautiful monitors out there, which I could use and work with. But if I'm somewhere in the field, in the middle of nowhere, and I've got a minimal setup with me, I have to think about how I could achieve still a production workflow for that, what I want to grade. And what I utilize is to work with a MacBook Pro, because it has an HDR screen, and maybe other computers or displays have the same HDR screen. But what is key for us, or for me, is that Apple introduced something which they call EDR technology. And this EDR technology helps us to do one thing. We could have our graphical user interface of our editing software, and within that, we could have a frame where the HDR content is shown more or less precise. I say more or less because if I compare that to a high-end monitoring solution, it will not be exactly the same, but it's close into that direction, and that helps us to work on a small device in the field with HDR content. They also feature a profile which they call P3 SD2084, color profile, which supports us further in doing it. So the complete graphical user interface is sent in, and the user interface itself is rendered in HDR2. So it's very dim. That's most of the time a problem when I'm in a bright environment. But when I'm in a dim environment, I get an even more exact production of my HDR rendering, which I want to edit. But there's another thing I need that I can use this kind of technology, and this is the support from the editing software. So the editing software has to support that HDR technology, that I have the graphical user interface and the HDR rendering within it. And there are not too many out there which support that at the moment. And it works good with Apple's own system. So Final Cut is an editing tool which I could use with that way. And Blackmagic Design DaVinci Resolve is working with it too. So I can have a HDR preview within my normal graphical user interface. Another advantage for us is that if we go with those MacBook Pros, we have got quite capable devices for the editing and on-the-go rendering of our footage. Another thing is compatibility issues. I don't know if you can see it too good, but in the upper left of my picture I show here, you may see some things like color banding. This is one of the things that happens. So we have a lot of compatibility issues. Not all devices or platforms fully support that HDR content. It can result in that inconsistent viewing experience. Even apps from the same platform on different devices look different. So the HDR content may not appear as intended. And we've got two solutions for it. One is, for me, as a small creator, very difficult. So to test the footage on a lot of devices, to see how it looks when it's played on Android or iOS devices, for example. Then maybe create some fallback versions of the content in SDR, because some platforms are not capable to show that HDR content in every kind of their publication. So there's a lot of work in it. And the second option we now use at the moment, especially for HDR, is to get a little bit more control over our target display behavior, and at least to use the technology with Dolby Vision. So set up a Dolby Vision workflow with more defined metadata or picture settings, so that we, when we create something in our editing environment, so it's as intended, that the later upload is as intended. So quick overview over our workflow from the acquisition of the content with drones, with cameras. You may know editing in Blackmagic, DaVinci Resolve, and color grading there. Monitoring on the go with a MacBook Pro, stationary with a Pro Display XDR, or for reference control with, for example, that's Sony Monitor. So we know at least a little bit of how different it shows up in the internal display and on a more reference side. And then encoding it as H.265 and upload it to Instagram on an iOS device and review it on different devices, so that we have a little bit more experience again on what we're doing here. For me as a content creator, we are still not there where we could be. We have inconsistency and inconsistent behavior all the way. but a little bit of hope what I have is that if we get a broader support on the HDR on the platforms regarding HDR, we get a wider adoption and the quality on the overall platform could rise. And the other thing to go there, we need advanced tools for the content creation. And therefore, I would like if platforms would start to not only support HDR in a little and in a part of their tool sets, not only, for example, by Instagram and Reels, so that they also support it in like the story things. And therefore, it would be helpful if they develop built-in filters in HDR, start with HDR live streaming, so devices are capable, but the platform is not. And with that, have a great accessibility to a broader range of creators. The result for us, or for me, is that by stepping into that HDR thing, I got a lot of more engagement based on that HDR. So comments, which are rising within days, a high amount of feedback on that thing, which broaden the audience and increase the following I have. So it's an opportunity for creators. You should focus on a manageable workflow. And for me, it's kind of important to early adapt on it. That's it.
Thank you very much, Ronald. So if we have some questions, we'll pass the mic around. We have time for 2 or 3 questions.
A question I have thinking about social HDR and social media and the different devices that exist out there. Do you have any experience or thoughts or data for how different phone manufacturers or any sort of mobile devices are having varied support of HDR processing, or like we point out, right, Apple is very much invested in this ecosystem, but what about other manufacturers that support Android platforms and their various flavors that exist out there?
I personally have no data on it. I've just a little bit of experience and feedback on it. And just today, a colleague of mine said she got aware early May that by sudden her telephone or her mobile was showing up with HDR content. So there are many more which are coming up with it. But I think Apple is, with the iPhone or iOS platform, by far in the front.
Very beautiful photos, first of all. Do you get the feeling from the comments that more users are becoming aware that they're looking at HDR images or just looking at beautiful images?
Yeah. Yes, there are many comments which we get back on how beautiful HDR is used. Oh, it is shown in HDR. And the overall comment on the picture, not in terms of the creation or the composition, in terms of quality, are way more than we had before, or I had before. And there was a really break in it early 2023 when I started uploading HDR content. So the comment, especially in the beginning, were up to 50 to 60% more when I posted this footage.
So I wanted to bring up one issue with HDR content creation workflows right now, and that's HDR graphics. So with that opportunity, I'd like to make a plug for PNG 3rd edition, which has a CICP chunk now, so you can actually signal HDR. ICC, which has a tag to do the same thing. And these are all supported in macOS and a few third-party applications, but we need additional areas of support from lib or live PNG. which we need contributors for to finish the coding on that. And then we need evangelism so that we can get support extended into other platforms. And then finally, for compositing in HTML, we need an HDR canvas so that when you have those graphics, you can composite them with the images. Maybe you have the background video in HDR. So there are a few missing pieces, and we need the community to help finish building the rest. But thank you for your presentation.
Yeah, there's a lot to do. So, for example, if I have a video or I have a clip of a scene and I want to post it in a story, and then I post it as a reel, and then I want to post it in a story, and put an overlay on it, just write on it and say, look at my new video. I already have to deal with how good is the HDR to SDR conversion, because as soon as I add graphic on it, it's just shown in SDR. And that not very helpful.
Hi, for your freelance work, not necessarily your social media work, have you had a hard time convincing your clients that HDR is worth the investment, that they should be working on this in outside of like a Hollywood scenario?
No. Simple answer, no. Because if you show what is doable without investing too much into it, most people are convinced about what is doable with it. So, but you have to show them one time what the export could look like. So I, for myself, have an example how this film could look in SDR and how it could show up in HDR. And even if it's just for a conventional product introducing or something like that, many go for the HDR way. And for me personally, because we're dealing, or I deal since a long time with that topic, it doesn't make for me personally a difference if I export something in the end in SDR or in HDR. It's just something I had to get used to. Okay. Sorry. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for a great presentation. If you have additional questions, of course, you're free to engage with Ronald at the break.